Thank you. Yeah, and thank you to Erica for putting in so much work to that piece. Um, so yeah, so Mr. Bill, what would you like me to do?
What I'd like you to do is I do not think I'm recording this program right now, and I'm going to get off. You can I think you can keep. Oh,
Mhm. It's recording. I see the record in the top left of my
Yes.
screen.
you do see it recording. Okay, you're
Yes.
the expert.
Yes, it is
Okay,
recording.
okay, good. Then I'll just leave it. Yes. Well, proceed. Tell us about. First of all, I was, among other things, impressed that Erica memorized the piece. But how do I stop? Oh, wait a minute. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay. You memorize this. That's really great. Good work and with so much feeling. So, Samuel, tell us why you wrote this piece. I mean, there's a practical reason why you wrote it, but also the inner reason you wrote it.
hmm Yeah. But first, I would like to just thank you for inviting me and for letting me share my music with you guys and talk about it, and also just want to highlight Erica and just the work she put into it, and also my mom and dad who are here joining, which is wonderful. And the story behind this piece was one of the things we have to do here at Lanji is a really neat thing, which is to graduate all of the performers and instrumentalists have to have a piece written for them by a Lanji composer, and then they premiere it. And then all of the Lanji composers, of course, have to write pieces for these instrumentalists. And we call that like the custom commission requirement, which is really awesome. And so this was Erica's custom commission requirement. And when I was writing it with her, we kind of brainstormed on like, okay, she had input and ideas of how she wanted it to be, and then I had input and ideas of how I wanted it to be. And we took a couple things, and I really had like, that's a great question. I think they should do that for sure, because it's really really cool. We had a couple things that I kind of took and used to ins- inspire the piece, which is one is and Erica didn't know I was going to say this, but hopefully she's not offended. Last semester, she was doing like a whole bunch of work with like pieces she was working on, and basically her hands started to have like a pain in them, where she wasn't able to practice, and it was to the point that we didn't know like because we're in the same studio with the same piano teacher, us fellow piano students in the same studio, wasn't sure if she would ever be able to play again. And it was really hard for us to watch Erica go through that. And whenever she approached me about writing this piece, that was like the first thing that came to my mind is like, oh, this can be a piece that's like about that process of going through that injury and then healing from it, which was really a miracle. Another thing that played into this is like right before I wrote this piece, I went through a very traumatic time in my own life, one which I wasn't expecting, but was really, really just transformational in making me to become more like Christ. But it was a very difficult time that included a lot of suffering. And, and in addition to both of those things, pretty much right after I started writing this piece from those two inspirations, like Russia invaded Ukraine, and to me, when I was reading about it and seeing some of the images, it really played into that whole piece. And so I wrote the piece with a desire to commentate or kind of like work through the suffering that we experience as humans, knowing that it's a necessary part, which is really uncomfortable and very painful, but yet has a purpose. And at the end, we should have hope, right, through Christ. And so that was the motivation behind the piece and why I wrote it. And it was a difficult piece to write. But not only did it have the emotions they were heavy, and many times it was hard to write, but also just in terms of like compositionally, there were many times where I was like, I had all this material, I was trying to work with it. I was just like, I don't know what to do. I don't know where it needs to go and what needs to happen. So my composition teacher, Mr. Alden's, helped me a lot with it. And even he remarked when it was done, he was like, yeah, this piece was difficult for you because every week you came in and you were like, help me, I'm totally lost. And so it was cool, but it turned out in a really good way, and I'm glad and I'm really grateful for it. So yeah,
I think, regardless of denominations, we all believe in purgatory, or certainly experience it, uh, which is suffering produces character.
yes,
And God keeps working. He isn't. The suffering comes from the removal of things that interfere with us in our relationship with God. Um, and would Erica, I was, would you like to say anything, or would you prefer not to say anything? That's going to be awkward if you say, no, I don't want to say anything. But go ahead. You can say, I refuse to say anything. Uh,
Well, I just really want to thank Samuel for writing this piece for me. It was, yeah, just listening to my own performance of it, it was really like really an emotional time. So I just want to say thank you.
yeah, well, it was fun.
Now, for our next, oh, tell us a little bit more about what time is it? Oh, that's fine. Well, a little bit about your faith journey, or whatever word we use to describe it. Uh,
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
you can see on YouTube. You can see from a couple of years ago Samuel's baptism,
Hmm.
and I'd like to repeat myself to say that on my picture you see behind me a scene which remarkably fit Samuel's last piece, and then we added a cross to it. But that reminds me of when my son-in-law Gregory, 20 years ago, and he went through he was shot in the head once by a policeman accidentally. He is a wonderful Christian. And he was water baptized in the Atlantic Ocean 20 years ago now or so. And there was a thunderstorm when he was in the ocean. And after he was baptized, a rainbow came out. So looking at that picture kind of reminds me of the moving from darkness to light, which is what God wants us to do. So tell us about your journey before I say anything else, and then I talk too much.
Yeah. So my testimony, um, you know, is one that's really just meaningful to me, and it uh, wasn't the way that I envisioned it at all, which is how it usually works. And it, I was born into a Christian home, and my mom and dad were really really good at just instilling in me the gospel and telling me about it, and I'm super 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 grateful for that early introduction into it. And I had the struggle all the way until I was 17, which is when I was saved, of like knowing the truths of the gospel, but not like and understanding any of it, truly understanding it. And because I was born into a Christian home, like I always wanted to be saved, and I always believed that you know that was what I needed to do in order to really know God and to have peace and to know what would happen to me like after I died. And it was something that I think when I was 5, I I think I asked God to save me, and I told my parents. I know at that point I think I was still like even just learning how to process things, and so they were a little bit skeptical that I really understood like what was going on, but they were like, "Oh, that's good." And then whenever I was 12, I remember I talked with my grandma again about getting saved, and then I thought like I was saved at that point after praying the prayer that she had me to pray. And my grandma was wonderful, by the way. She was like a great church pianist who had like these massive binders of like arrangements and stuff that she would haul around with her, and she could play like any arrangement for weddings or anything you could think of. So she was really really cool. But even after that point, especially during my teenage years until I was 17, I struggled with just the concept of assurance of salvation. I had zero assurance. And I know it sounds weird because like when we ask God for salvation, right? Like we're supposed to get it. But I think it a lot of it is also depends on like if we truly understand it. And for me, I never had assurance of salvation because until I was 17, I always put the assurance of my salvation not on God and the person who I was trusting, right? But on myself and like the act of that prayer or the act of believing. And so basically it would be some nights it was like nightly I would almost be praying to God. I was like, God, like am I praying hard enough to really receive salvation? Like am I believing enough on your name to like really be confident that I can have it? And so I was putting the trust, or I was putting all my trust like on my prayer and on my own like amount of trust, which is kind of weird. But anyway, that's what I was doing, and at the time I didn't know it, but I was just really struggling because I had no assurance, and because also I had no motivation really to battle sin other than the fact that I knew it was wrong, and sin at that time was pretty much in control of my life. Most notably in outward forms through my pride because at that time I was using music just for myself. Like it was for me to be better than my friends and to have like my thing that I did, and it was completely self-focused. But in a marvelous way, God completely changed all that because I was talking with my mom again at the age of 17, and I remember I told her, I just don't know if I'm believing hard enough to receive salvation. And it was one of those moments where she kind of looked at me with this funny face. She was like, well, it's not really like how much you believe. It's just, do you believe or do you not believe? And it sounds simple, but that one phrase just clicked. And I realized, I don't have to prove to God how much I want salvation, or I don't have to prove to him that I'm believing hard enough. All I have to do is recognize that he already did the work on the cross to save me, that the work has been done, and that he wants to save me like faster than a heartbeat. All I have to do is just believe that it's there and believe and trust in him, and it will be done. And so after that, I was like, oh, I believe. Like I always, have thought it's true, and I do. And after that point, I've never struggled with assurance again. And I've like definitely not been perfect, but I have had motivation to fight sin, and God has slowly been changing me into a person who reflects Him more and more. And so that just pivotal moment where it clicked that belief was an act and not a measurable thing, um, just changed my life, and I think that was when I was saved. So that's my story of how I came to know Christ, and I'm super grateful for the young placing of it in my heart, and then it was just a matter of me, in God's timing, Him allowing me to understand it. So yeah,
Well, there's a saying that there are only two religions, one where God is the center and the other where self is the center.
yeah.
And we want to get into the first one and not the second. Now
Mm-hmm.
we are going to hear a famous German poem, which I never was familiar with a few days ago because I live in a state of ignorance. I live in New Jersey. And I'm sorry, New Jersey. I take that back. But it's Mignon's song, Do You Know the Land? And it's by Goethe, the original poem in German. And there's a translation I have in English, which I could read. Do you know the land where lemon trees blossom, where golden oranges glow amid dark leaves? A gentle wind blows from the blue sky. The myrtle stands silent, the laurels tall. Do you know it? There, oh there, I desire to go with you, my beloved. Do you know the house? Its roof rests on pillars. The hall gleams, the chamber shimmers, and marble statues stand and gaze at me. What have they done to you, poor child? Do you know it? There, oh there. I desire to go with you, my protector. Do you know the mountain and its clouded path? The mule seeks its way through the mist. In caves the ancient brood of dragons dwells. The rock falls steeply, and over it the torrent. Do you know it? There, oh there, lies our way. Oh Father, let us go. Now we're about to hear this in another language, not German. Tell us a language, Samuel.
It'll be Chinese.
And how did that come to be?
So again, this was through that custom commission requirement where um, this Chinese singer studying here for her master's needed to have a piece written for her, and so she put out like a notification. She was like, I have this text by Goethe, which I translated into Chinese that I would like to be set in Chinese because she wanted to sing it in Chinese. And this text by Goethe has also been set by Wolf, Schumann, Schubert, and Brahms. And I think I fell into the same trap they did because when I read it, I was like, I have to set this text. It's just a beautiful text. And so I I I agreed to do it, and it was really neat experience, and just really interesting. And I can talk about now how we did it or after we listened to it. But it was pretty cool to do it.
Well, let's listen to it.
Hmm.
And let me go back to sharing the screen. Whoops.
Could you also turn up your volume?
Oh, for me
For the last,
talking. Oh, for the music?
yes, the last
Oh,
piece was quiet.
okay.
Hmm.
How do I, oh, I know how to, I guess I know how to do that. So was the last one hard to hear?
Yes, a little bit.
Hmm. Okay, maybe I shouldn't mute. Would that help?
I think it's just the output volume on your computer, but
Oh, the output volume. Okay, of course that makes sense. Give me one moment. System preferences,
Mm.
sound, uh, testing. I think it's at maximum. So,
Yeah, check the output volume on the video itself. When you play on YouTube, it also has the
oh,
volume there.
oh, turn it up on there. Okay. All right. So maybe it's turn up. Okay. Thank you, Dale. Uh, share screen. That's good. Uh, Good. Can you tell us, Samuel, Chinese is a pitch language. Explain how you could set that poem to music.
Yeah. So this was interesting because I don't know how to speak Chinese. I don't really know anything about it at all. So it was definitely like a bit of an adventure. So basically, I said, okay, I can do this. I can write it. But I would like you to send me like a lot of material beforehand. And so I had her send me, well, first off, because, Chinese has like the characters for the words, a side-by-side of the Chinese characters with the phonetic, like spelling out of it. So I could hear the syllables in each character and know which character corresponded to which syllables. Then I asked her to send me a side-by-side Chinese and English translation, and then a side-by-side where she had the phonetic characters and the English translation. So then I could match up which words corresponded with which sounds in English. So then I knew which ones were like the important words, right? And the words to highlight. And then in addition to that, I said, I would like you to send me a recording of yourself listening to or reading the entire poem in Chinese. And then it was kind of interesting because then I was like, up late at nights, I got like singing these weird Chinese vowels in my room, and all my roommates were like, what do you do? But basically I listened to the recording of her reading it on like half speed or quarter speed sometimes, which was trickier because then the sound got distorted, right? And I was listening to the intervals of her reading it because like changing the pitch does change the meaning. So I took actually those intervals and used them to make the melody of the piece. Not perfectly, but pretty closely in most cases. And then I also took not only the intervals, but also the rhythm of the way she wrote it, or she read it. So like she said, like, Ning Qing Dao Mian. Then I took that same rhythm of da di da dia and tried to keep the rhythm the same. The interesting thing is it actually worked because after I wrote it, I said, okay, does this make sense to you? Like when you sing it, are you able to understand it? Would like a listener who knows Chinese understand what it's saying? And she said, yes, except that the really interesting thing was sometimes she would point to the ends of a phrase. It was always the end of the phrase. And she would say, okay, here, the pitches need to actually go up because when they say these phrases, they go up in pitch at the end. So I don't know why that needed to happen, but then I changed it to make them go up near the end, and then it works. So it was kind of interesting and a really neat experiment. But I still know nothing about Chinese, even though I did all that. So it was cool. But
now, could you tell us about Death, Redemption, Life? Introduce it.
Mm-hmm. But first, does anyone have any?
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Discussion. I forgot there are other people here. Excuse me. Oh, please raise your hand if you're here. Okay. No hands. Oh, that's good. Okay, I'll keep talking. No, yes. Any comments, please?
Loving it. It's amazing.
Thank you.
The first piece, no problem. It's a pleasure. Even though I'm running around the playground with children, I'm still tuned in. Yeah, I really like the first piece, especially like the use of dissonance. I love dissonance in music, man. And in the beginning, I was like, okay, it starts off like that, and then it got a little, mellow. Then you brought it back, and I was like, oh yeah, that's really good stuff. And also the use of your timing, it wasn't like a song that I could predict, and I love that, So yeah, man, great stuff, man. Thanks.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Anyone else?
Well, I would just like to say this is beautiful music, Samuel, and it's extremely emotional. I mean, all three pieces, when I listened to them, it brought a lot of emotion in. And the first one we listened to about suffering, that just meant a lot to me. That brought an extreme emotional response out of me, because it sounded like you had this pronouncement in the beginning that was dissonant, and that obviously, the pain was there. And then it morphed into something like a prayer. It sounded like that there was a prayer in there, and then there was more back and forth with the questioning. And the way I love the way you end your pieces, because they bring out a beautiful resolution. Anyway, it's just beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. That means a lot. Yeah.
I think the singer of your song obviously felt that, felt. I was interested in, Bill's reading of the translation to start with, but you could see that she was feeling what was going on in that music, not only vocally, but in her inner being and her presentation of it. It was very lovely.
Yes.
Ian, what were you going to say? Or are you going to say?
Right.
You raised
Thanks.
your hand.
Yeah, I enjoy the music, and I like the different tools in your toolbox that you use to express things in different ways. One thing that I'm really curious about is how you approach form in your pieces. Both of them to me are abstract because I don't know Chinese, and also the idea of suffering. If I could see that in the textures, but I don't know if I would have guessed the title if you had said, "Here's the music. What's the title?" So the whole thing to me about the story is the form, and I'm just curious how you approach form musically or how that works for you.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's actually a bit of a weak point with me because often I will let the music ramble on a little bit too much, or just going to different places. And so my teacher is like, well, don't be too rhapsodic in that sense, right? And just going all over the place, and keep it more structured. When I start writing, I don't usually have a concrete idea of what the form needs to be. But when I think about it a little bit into the process, I usually don't think in terms of does this need to be an ABA, or does it need to be like a ronda form? I don't think about those as much as I think about what do I want the general shape of it to be. And then I go to drawing the graph, where I draw the different peaks and valleys that I want to happen at certain points in the piece, because I want there to be a certain trajectory of where the piece goes in the form of it based off of the message of the piece. And this was especially true in the Why Do We Suffer one, where I changed things around a lot as I was writing. And that usually happens. So I have a basic form in mind of, okay, I want this first section to be like this, and this next section to be like this, and then for the peak to happen here, and so on. But then as I'm writing, usually what happens is through the process of, discovering the piece as you go through it, all that kind of changes, and then something else happens kind of naturally. So I'm not sure exactly the way I approach form. I see it as a means to the end of expressing the message of the piece. And so whatever does that to me is good. And I don't really try to make it as clear as I should, probably what's this section, that section, Does that answer your question? Nice. That was a good question. Yeah, thank you.
Jan, you have to unmute yourself, though.
Yeah. I thought the vocal piece, the process that you used to write the vocal piece was a work of genius. And I just wondered if you came up with that process all by yourself, or Did you read about that, or your teacher help you with that, or how did you decide on the process of writing that vocal piece?
That's a good question. I think so. I just asked her to send me like the side by side translations, but then I realized, because at first I forgot that Chinese was a pitch language, so I was just going to set it, but then I realized, oh wait, I have to make sure that it's like the pitches would make sense with like that you're not changing the words based off the different pitches. And so then I was just like, well, I need to have it read so I could hear kind of how it works. And I don't think I got that from somewhere else. The idea of actually translating the pitches into the melody didn't occur to me until I listened to it. And then at first I thought I had the idea that I would just listen to it and kind of get the relative like shape of it. But when she was reading it, it was so clear the intervals between like the different notes. And so, especially when I slowed it down, I was like, oh, this is definitely like this interval and this interval. And because of that, I just was like, well, let me try to use these pitches and then build the rest of the piece around that. And that worked. So it was a little bit of a natural, I think, process. But yeah.
I think we need to move on to death, redemption, life. And should we, what would you like to say something, Samuel, first, or what would you
Well,
like?
I have one question that piggybacks on the one that we just heard. When you say you worked with the intervals and with the pitches, was it kind of an absolute pitch type of thing that was close to an E followed by close to an A? Or did you think that's a perfect fourth and I can move it wherever I want?
I think it was more of the absolute pitches. Yeah. So I think I heard like, okay, starting note, and then the other notes based around that frame. And then I would just kind of go off of that. And then, of course, the intervals between them. But I don't think I moved them around until I had like written the whole thing. And then, of course, if I needed to transpose it for like the other parts to work harmonically, then I just transpose the whole thing up and down. So, yeah. Thanks. So about the next piece, the Death, Redemption, Life, I don't have much to say other than this was another piece that I had thought about for a while. And this piece started like in many different forms and then eventually morphed into this. And there has been a lot of really just wonderful people helping me with it, and especially all the musicians who worked on it. They put in so much time into working on it, and it was really wonderful to just, they were enthusiastic about it, and so I'm grateful to them and for my teacher in helping me to like get it to really to work. So yeah.
Being in a group is a good antidote for egotism.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Let's hear Death, Redemption, Life. Can you tell us the names of the performers?
Mm-hmm. So there's Patrick Wu, who is he's actually masters in violin and composition on first violin, and then there's Tatiana Zemendok, who is undergraduate in violin studies, and then we have Simone Cartalis, who's on viola, and she is a master's in viola, and then we have Matthew Hennigan, who actually is a graduate from Berkeley, and he came in to play cello, which is wonderful of him. So those are the names of the performers. They're all amazing. Yeah. Thank you.
I find it remarkable that you've produced so much quality music already at your young age. I especially liked your transitions into that last section of the last section before the imitative one in that last piece there.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I really like the social influences in your music. I'm a big fan of, ethnomusicology and, how society influences the way we think, produce, so forth, all this exciting stuff. And I feel like that's a summary of your life work. I can hear a little bit of cartoon music in there, like some Disney stuff. I can hear some video game music in there, and then I can hear like, your real composer. I'm an adult now music in there, So it was a really nice life's journey. Yeah, man. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Thanks. Yeah, there's definitely some of that in there, which is cool.
And you have a great skill for really making the most of what any instrument you write for can do idiomatically.
Thank you. I'm glad.
Especially true, I thought of the piano piece. Lots of the other two. This is an exciting time for your life. If this is what you're doing now, I can't wait to see what you have come up with by 5-10 years down the road.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good job. Thanks for sharing your music with us.
Thank you. Yeah, that means a lot.
I keep thinking of eye has not eye has not seen, nor ear heard, neither has it entered into the heart of man, the things that God has prepared for them that love him. And of course, we're listening to music, and that's with our ear. And then we see things with our eye, but what we're promised is even beyond that. So I don't know what I'm saying, but I will say amen to it.
Mm-hmm.
Samuel, this is just once again, it's a beautiful expression of emotion. This is probably my fourth time listening to it, and I just don't get tired, especially during the Eastern season, which is extremely emotional anyway. But there's so many sections in there you can relate with it. It's the first part, the death scene. You could just really feel that because there was a finality to it, and then the shock and the resignation after that. You feel that emotion, and then you come in with that little light theme, and you feel the feet of the ladies that are going to the tomb, and they feel the surprise, and they go running back. So one thing I wanted to say is your endings. They're just totally amazing, and I talked to a little bit before about the resolution that you have in your endings, but it's almost like this one is almost like how you go to a movie or an event. And after the event, you feel like you want to talk about it. And the ending that you have on this particular piece is like that. It's like you're discussing it. You're enjoying it all over again. And it's just very unique. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Today, of course, is in the Eastern Orthodox Church, which has a lot to be prayed for. Is Easter. Catholics, this is known as Divine Mercy Sunday. And for Protestants, we have Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. And of course, what's wonderful with our group is that there's only one Jesus, and he participates in all the things we do. But with the divisions that we have within our families, all the way to the entire planet, and ever in between, would be healed more. And so God is in the process of doing that for each of us. Is there somebody, before we would do that, next month we will be having a Greg Pascusi, who is a gentleman who's sitting very quietly, I think pretty quietly, And we are going to hear a piece of his prayer for the Ukraine,
Mm.
and he's going to be performing it pretty soon to record it because it's for piano and for trumpet, right? And but we'll hear a couple other pieces of his. And Greg is a very fine composer. And I hopefully the following month we will be having Barb home and music of hers, including this is good if you get on this program and you write a piece and the performance, when you get it, finally they will perform a piece of yours. Whoa, they're going to perform a piece of mine. Wow. Oh, it's a minute long. Wait till I tell my grandmother. So, anyway, we have value, it's not the number of performances, the kudos, all that. That is all irrelevant. It's fine. It's good, but our identity doesn't come from that. But having said that, sometimes you write a piece of music, and maybe if you're fortunate, in one case, an orchestral piece I wrote, it was about 3 years later, I got the recording of it. The audio was with a singer and an orchestra, and it took a couple of years, but it did happen. Sometimes they don't get recorded. Sometimes you get music performed and you didn't know that it was being performed, and all kinds of variation. I don't think people that are performers understand what it's like to be a composer. It's like we're perpetually asking somebody out for a date, and then they never want to go out for. Most of them don't want to go for a second date. One was enough. At any rate, someone that hasn't spoken yet, could you close us with prayer? So if you were quiet, you're going to have to say, yes, that's me. I'll say a prayer now.
I'm looking at Nicole. I'm looking at Nicole.
I'm not quite sure what you said. Okay. Well, I'm going to ask.
No, someone said I'll do it. There was someone that said I'll do it.
Who said it? Were you the someone, Dale?
No. I nominated Nicole.
Nicole. Okay.
Ian's got his hand up. He's got the little yellow hand.
Oh, he's using the yellow hand again. Okay. All right. Well, then who's, all right. Nicole, Ian, somebody, would you say a prayer?
I don't care who it is. I didn't hear anyone, so I said I'd do it. But if Nicole wants to do it, that's fine.
Who is Nicole? I don't see anybody.
Mom.
Oh, your mom.
Oh,
okay.
No,
That would be great.
Nicholas. Yeah.
Nicholas's
Nicholas
mom is Nicole. Is that right?
No, Sam's mom.
Yeah.
Sam's mom. I'm sorry.
Nicole?
Nicholas.
Nicholas. It says
that's my husband is Nicholas, and I'm Joy.
Oh,
you're
that's
Joy.
why I'm listening, not saying anything. I didn't know. Yes, I would be happy to close in prayer.
I think that would be really good. Thank you. It took a while for us to figure it out, about 5 minutes. Go ahead.
The sun is in my eye. The sun is in my eye.
Dear Lord, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to gather together and be able to discuss this music that you have given. And I just praise you for being our King of Kings. I praise you for having all dominion, and all the power and the glory belongs to you. We praise you for just giving exceedingly abundantly above all we ask or think, and we give you glory for that. And I pray that you would continue to develop music for you through all of these people, through Samuel, through all of us, that you would use us that we would be vessels in your hands, moldable, that we would continue to just be tools of giving you glory and also bringing other people to you. And I pray that you would use all the music to be a testimony of your love, of your gift of grace, of salvation, and your forgiveness through Christ on the cross. And I pray all these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, Joy. What a great name. Well, we'll hopefully see some of you next month as God leads. And whatever you do, do heartily as to the Lord and not to men.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Bill.
Yes.
Thank you. Bye. Goodbye. See you soon.
All right. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. Great seeing so many faces again.
Thanks for coming. Next time, bring a friend or even bring an enemy. Okay.